It's a lot of fun. Like for hockey junkies, we should be paying them a ton of money just for the right to sit here and talk like this, because it's a ton of fun trying to put this jigsaw puzzle together.
Welcome back to Hockey North. I'm your host, Karissa Donkin, and this week we're getting you ready for Olympic men's and women's hockey here on CBC Sports, which is your home for all things Olympics and Paralympics. And we've got less than 2 months to go now. Hard to believe until the Olympics begin. And this week we've got two really important games happening for the women's national team. These are the final tune-up games before the Olympics, the last two games of the Rivalry Series against the United States set for Edmonton this week. The first game goes on Wednesday, the second on Saturday, both at 9 p.m. Eastern. Now, we know that Canada lost the first two games against the United States in November by a combined score of 10-2. Here's a look at how the Canadian roster is going to be a little bit different this time around. So joining the roster are some veterans from the Ottawa Charge. We've got forwards Brienne Jenner and Emily Clark. Of course, Clark was rehabbing an off-season injury in November, and Brienne Jenner has had a great start to her season with the Ottawa Charge. Defender Jocelyn Larocque is back in the mix, looking to make her fourth Olympic team. We've also got Anne-Renee Desbiens back between the pipes after some rest in November, and she's joined by Montreal Victoire teammate Nicole Gosling, a rookie on defense. So that means we won't see Vancouver forwards Hannah Miller, whose eligibility status is still up in the air with the IIHF, and we also won't see Sarah Nurse, who's currently on long-term injured reserve. Katie Tabeman and Micah Zandy Hart are also missing from the November roster on the back end, and NCAA goaltender Eve Gascon will sit these games out too. All right, so we've got the great Cheryl Pounder joining us today. Of course, you see her on TSN, you see her on the PWHL broadcast, and in February, you're going to see her on our CBC Olympics coverage. It's always so great to talk to you, Cheryl. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I love your plaid. I was going to put plaid on myself. Looking forward to all things hockey coming up. I mean, it's going to be an amazing year, 2026, of course. Lots going on, lots of research happening, and loving every minute of it. I mean, every 4 years we get this opportunity to soak it all in and talk about the storylines. So giddy up.
How fun is that? That's awesome. Well, before we get into talking about the 2026 Olympic team, Cheryl, I want to take you a little bit back in time to 2006 when you won Olympic gold in Italy, almost 20 years ago now. First of all, what comes to mind when you think of that team, that experience in Italy? And, you know, for my money, I think that's the best Canadian roster we've ever seen.
I think you're bang on. And it was the greatest team that I've ever been a part of. And that's not taking away from the 2002 team that I played alongside. I mean, there's so many valuable lessons learned in that 2002 year and the adversity that was carried forward with a lot of the returning players in 2006. But I feel like it was a team that recognized that each role needed to be played to its fullest. And I think we had players that were hitting their prime in that 2006 year. You know, you had the selflessness of Vicky Sanahara, who was the glue between, you know, the top line and someone who may play a few minutes. She was just the glue who expressed a value. I had the great Cassie Campbell-Pascal who wore the captaincy and wasn't afraid to push the buttons at the right time. And then, of course, you had the Haley Wickenheisers, the Sherry Pipers of the world. I mean, the list goes on and on, the Danielle Goyettes. And then if you go to the back end, I had one of my besties in Becky Keller. We had a ton of fun back there. Only 5 defenders. It didn't take 6 to that Olympic Winter Games because Carolyn Ouellette played a role of both forward and a D because she was on the power play. Every once in a while, you get just so fortunate to be part of a group that's bigger than yourself. And you don't know how you got there. You know, I think we'd all be GMs and we'd be, you know, be making $1 jillion if we had the special sauce that we could bottle. But to me, we just had it. And yeah, it's just we won together and moment I'll never forget for sure.
Well, fast forward to today, Cheryl, obviously things look quite a bit different when we're talking about how this team is created. Centralization is a thing of the past. And for folks at home who don't know what that is, you know, you'd have all the hopefuls gather together in one place, live together for months, compete against each other. It sounds pretty grueling from what you can attest to that, eh? So that's a thing of the past now with the PWHL. We're only getting to see 4 Team Canada games ahead of February. So PWHL play is obviously, going to be a factor in who makes this team. But how important, Cheryl, are these last 2 games that we're going to see in the Rivalry Series next week to determining who's on that roster in February?
I think for the players that, would be bubble vying for those spots, I think this is a critical time. So yeah, I think it's a pivotal time, obviously coming off of 2 games, where, pretty much the Americans dominated to some degree, especially in game 1. And then of course in the third period in game number 2, I would say that, yeah, you got to seize your opportunity, but I do think there are a specific group of players that would be fighting for those last roster spots.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of those roster battles in a bit, but those first 2 games, Cheryl, to your point, the United States did dominate, outscoring Canada 10-2.
Yeah.
Of course, that's not the roster that we're going to see in February. Notably, we didn't see Emmerich Smashmeyer or Anne Renee Davian play a single game in goal. So, are you concerned by those performances at all?
I think anytime you see sort of that kind of a score, and consistently a 4-1 and a 6-1, you say to yourself, oh boy, there's some work to do. But in terms of it being the marker of what's going to happen, no, not at all. Because when you get to a short-term competition, and as we've seen with Canada and its experience, they've proven they can win, right? They've proven they can win. And when you get down to a 1-game set, between nerves, I think games are played harder. Forechecks are harder. The sticks are a little tighter. So I do think that I don't think this is necessarily a forecast or a foreshadow of what is to come, but I do see, there's holes there, or areas that they need to improve on that they would certainly take away from it. Just like John Morbolewski would say, wow, well, this line really worked for me. I really like it. I'm going to continue to go with that, to the same degree that Canada can say, well, we need work in this area. So, but I don't look at it and go, okay, 10-2, it's over, right? Like it's not. I think when puck drops in Milan, you're talking about a clean slate, fresh start. Because when you're in the pressure cooker like that, anything can happen.
We've really seen 2 very different strategies, I think, from Canada and the USA just in this quad. I think I wondered too, with somebody like a Caitlin Kramer, who's gotten a decent amount of opportunity in those first 2 rivalry series games. Like she's getting that opportunity now, but it might be a little too late. Right? And yeah. if we saw her come into the program maybe a year ago or something like that, would it be a different story?
Yeah, and that was sort of my point to that, whereas they would come in, and I remember asking Troy about some of those questions. I think it might have been about Kristen Campbell at one point, just like, when does she get a game? When are they going to go beyond practice and get, this is more of a development model? And it always felt like Canada really played to win in those games. But Caitlin Kramer, I still believe has a shot because she's going to both rivalry series. I don't think that you're bringing in a young player like this if you don't think that they're legitimately vying in this moment to these last 2 games before you're going to meet up, likely and potentially a final in Milan. So I do think that she does have a fair shake at this. Time will tell, but it'll be her opportunity to seize, because to me, she is one of those players that is fighting for one of those last roster spots.
Yeah, and to talk about some of those roster battles, Cheryl, like to me, the most interesting battle is on defense. Obviously, the Canadians are very deep on the back end. You've got a veteran like Jocelyn The Rock looking to go to her 4th Olympics. And then you've got somebody like Chloe Primorano, this talented defender of the future looking to go to her 1st Olympics. And then you've got somebody like Sophie Jakes, who's really popped in the PWHL, but, hasn't really been able to carve out that role. With Hockey Canada, and, she's not getting that power play time. Does she really have a role on this team? So, you were a defender, Cheryl. What kind of mix do you expect to see on this team, and how interesting do you think that battle is?
Now it was much different, right, when I played, because Becky Keller and I, we were stapled to the offensive blue line, right? Like we did not enter the zone. We backed up. We were up against top competition and high hard off the glass, right? So it's so much different. I personally think you have to have a solid mix, because it's not just going to be an offensive free for all in a gold medal game. But certainly you've got, Renata Fast, and you've got Shelton, and you've got Thompson and Ambrose, who've all proven that, these are their spots. You've got Primorano, and you do have Jakes, as you mentioned, and this would be the core that was in the original, the first two games of the Rivalry Series, and now again in the second leg. Could they be in a situation where a Jocelyn Larocque is part of that third pairing and playing with either one, because they will take 7? Does it give Sophie Jakes an opportunity, or Chloe Primorano, to get some power play minutes, depending on what happens, how it's looking? So I do think that could happen. And then you've got Nicole Gosling that's coming in, right? So, but she would have to be on fire in 2 games in order to be, I think, really heavily considered. But again, I'm not wearing the GM hat here. I'm more taking it from the approach that, okay, she didn't get those first 2 games. Again, you got Mikey Zandy Hart there. You've got, so it's just going to be interesting. But yeah, the blue line to me is going to be a big piece of the pie, because you got to get out to generate offense.
Well, thank you, Cheryl, for making the time to speak with us. I mean, it's fun. It's a fun time. We've got lots of great hockey to talk about. You must be in your glory. So thanks for making a few minutes for us.
Thanks for having me. I am in my glory. I am just so pumped to be in the building. And just watch the best on best hockey. I think it's fantastic. I think all these athletes have grown so much. I think the PWHL has highlighted, the Gardners of the world, the Millers of the world, the Daryl Wattses of the world. And I think that's only going to continue to happen with more evaluation within the PWHL. It's going to make national teams across the board better as different players come, and as Michelle Carvinen's in the league now. I just think it's fantastic, and really excited for the storylines and the passion that only the Olympics really evokes. So pumped.
We're also talking about men's hockey here, and I had the chance to sit down with Team Canada General Manager Doug Armstrong as well, talking about some of the really tough roster decisions on his plate, and of course the big news this week that the ice surface is going to be a little bit smaller than everybody expected. Here's what he had to say. So I think the first thing we have to talk about, because a lot of folks have been talking about it lately, is there has been a lot of concern about the timeline of the construction on the Santa Giulia ice hockey arena that's going to be used for the Olympics. What, if any, concerns does your group have on, the readiness of that arena for when you arrive in Italy?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not concerned at all, because they're not things we can control. I'm a big eliminate the white noise type of person, and our job is to prepare a team that can play, and it's somebody else's job to build a hockey rink. And so I'm comfortable. I heard a lot of the same noise going into Sochi that they were running behind, but it's a massive event, and I have a lot of faith in the organizers that they'll be up and running.
And we did hear yesterday on Sportsnet from Peter DeBoer that it looks like the ice is actually going to be a few feet smaller than an NHL-sized ice surface. I guess, what do you think about that, and how does that affect, if it does affect, how you choose your roster?
Yeah, it won't affect how we choose the roster, but it will be interesting. We'll have to get out the old VH tapes back and look at the odd and the old Boston Gardens to see how to play in that smaller barn. But I'm not sure. I think not the length. It's just where they're going to take the ice out of. Is it going to be in the neutral zone? Is it going to be in all 3 zones equally? Is it going to go just in the offensive zone? So it's going to be interesting to see how they make those subtle changes, and it'll affect obviously the defenseman. I think if it comes out of the zone, you're obviously a little closer to the net, a little closer to the play. You can be able to probably get out to the points a little bit quicker, again, depending on. But I don't think it's going to have a massive effect. But it's just another curveball that we'll deal with. But we're no different than any other team. We're all going to have to deal with this.
I've heard you say a few times, Doug, that one major takeaway you had from the Four Nations face-off was sort of that back to basics reminder that, the way you win these games is you need to win at the front of your net and you need to win at the front of their net. How does that philosophy kind of impact how you're selecting the roster?
Yeah, we've talked about that quite a bit as a management staff and with our coaches, and like you see in the NHL, like goals, very few goals are scored from distance. You got to get pucks into the hard areas. You have to have people willing to go compete in those hard areas, and they come from broken plays, scrambles. You're going to have your odd highlight goal, but I think as the competition narrows down into the medal round and the gold medal game, hopefully we're in both of those. That you're going to have to play in the harder areas, and obviously if you're 6'2", 220 or 5'10", 175. There's a pretty big difference there on it. And the heart might be the same size, but just the physical attributes might be different. So we're going to take, obviously, you're going to have a lot of skill and a lot of other things, but I think size and the ability to play in the interior is important.
Yeah, and related to that, even though you're playing by double IHF rules, like how much does that philosophy lend itself to bringing a guy like, say, Tom Wilson, who wasn't at Four Nations, but can play that kind of gritty game?
Yeah, to me, that like the Four Nations, Tom Wilson could have played in that event is just as easy. There's no fighting, but the game itself isn't much different. Double IHF rules or NHL rules. Once you get into the level of competition, you might have one or two power plays on each side. The referees want to stay out of the game. The players want to take the game over. And my experiences are that it's a very well called game. Very few infractions, and it's just men playing, in men's hockey, they're playing at the front of the net and to the front of the net. And so I think we want to be able to play in those areas.
You talked about, Doug, players finding you. And I think about, some of the younger players right now, like a Macklin Celebrini, a Connor Bedard, Matthew Schaefer, Wyatt Johnston, who've made a big impact at the beginning of this season. What would those young players need to do to crack this roster in your mind?
Well, they need to continue playing the way they are. That's at the forefront. We still have another full month before we have to select this team, and our goal is to use all that time to make sure we're putting the proper players in place. And then the understanding they have another month, and unfortunately, when we look at the injury list in the NHL, the likelihood of all the players from all the countries being selected and getting on a plane is very, very unlikely. And so what we're going to do is use that January to make sure we continue to scout. But those players are doing what all they can do. They're playing outstanding hockey. They're leading their teams. They're playing in all the different situations necessary, and they're making our job difficult. And that's really what we want is difficult decisions.
And for Celebrini in particular, to get to see him at the World Championship, to get to see him play along somebody like Sidney Crosby, I guess what kind of impact did that have on, on his stock or on your idea of what somebody like him could bring to the team?
Yeah, it obviously on the ice, everyone sees what we see on the ice, but I was impressed with his ability, like I was impressed with Sidney Crosby's ability as a younger player when I'd watch him at these events, is to mold himself into the group effortlessly and to be accepted by more mature players with more experience. He has a great humbleness to himself, but he's also not afraid to play when the puck drops, and that's the not showing the respect in the room, but not showing respect on the ice. Meaning he has to compete against these guys. He wants that job, and they want not give him that job. And he's done a great job of being respectful as a young player to the veteran players. But when the competitions start, putting his best foot forward, and I think that's what they respect. And we saw that at the Worlds, and now we see it every night with this club team.
And we always hear the debate about, sort of that veteran experience versus youth. But I feel like this tournament is a bit unique because, so few players have been to the Olympics. I mean, you only have a couple of guys who would be in that category. Of course, Sidney Crosby would be one of them. But I guess how does that impact your thoughts around how you find that mix of that sort of youth and the veteran experience as well?
Well, I think you always, when you're evaluating people in our industry, one of the lights the brightest. If you make the Stanley Cup playoffs, and then if you don't make that, the World Championships, and then we added that extra ingredient last year, the Four Nations. So what players were selected there? How do they perform there? What players played in the playoffs? And then you the players that played in that Four Nations obviously have a leg up in international competition. It's just a reality. They've done it in, it'll be about a calendar year since they've done it before, the last time they did it. So they have that experience. But at the end of the day, once the puck drops, it's still hockey. And hockey doesn't check a birth certificate when the puck drops. They just the players will tell where they're at in their maturity of their game. And we've seen younger players excel, and now we've seen veteran players, like I thought Drew Doughty came in last year, and Brad Marchand were excellent in the Four Nations. And their veteran savvy allowed us, a player like Harley and Doughty, to perform well together. So you do want experience. one of the things that we talk about, or I think about, is, the Connor McDavid's last year. What experience did he gain from that? And McKinnon, what experience did he gain from that international? I think it's a ton. And so I think we're going to ask probably 70% of that team that if they make it to play that forward. So I think they gained a lot of experience for that international hockey last year in the Four Nations.
And you only invited 3 goaltenders to your orientation camp back in August, Doug. But I've heard you say that, people shouldn't read into that as you've got your 3 set, that there are plenty of other guys who could factor into that conversation. Where do things stand as we speak at the goaltending position? And I think the number I've heard you say before is something like, it could be 7 or 8 different guys who are in the mix. How many are we seeing at this point as you're getting so close to your next round of meetings? Who would be in the mix for playing in net?
Yeah, I don't want to get into specific names, but I think to clarify, we invited the 3 goalies that were at the Four Nations because we did think it was a long list of players, and it would have looked like we're having a goalie camp and not not an orientation camp. We invited everybody we're going to watch, but what we did, though, was call those other goaltenders with that explanation that it wouldn't have been practical to bring everyone there, but everyone has a fair opportunity to compete, and we've seen players like Wedgwood that have come basically out of left field this year, a good NHL goaltender for a long time, but he's playing at a level that's new to him right now for the extended period of time on the best team in the NHL in Colorado. So the players have added their names into the equation, and that's what we talked about earlier. It wasn't just the forwards that found us. There's some goaltenders that found us too, and it's going to make our job over the next month exciting to find out, what we cherish as far as experience to how they're playing today. And but that, I would say, that competition is still very fluid.
Okay. And just a last one on a player who might have, found you this season with their competition. We don't hear as much about a guy like Morgan Geekie, who's tied for the lead in goals, or was as of yesterday with Nathan McKinnon, wasn't at your orientation camp in August. Is it getting kind of close to the cutoff where somebody could really make that statement, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we have that long list of players that we wanted to, and he was on that list. He played well last year, and his goal scoring is obviously at the tops of the NHL right now. So we're fortunate that Don Sweeney's on our staff, so he knows him well, and is a big fan. So we're going to debate him also. We're going to have hard decisions to make, that's for sure. One of the areas of strength right now for Canada, and I think it's fluid every tournament, but the forward group is extremely deep right now. The Canadian forwards might be the deepest they've been in a while, and that's going to make that selection process that much harder.
All right, and just one last one for you, Doug. Sidney Crosby spoke to CBC Sports last month, and he said he hopes this won't be his final Olympic Games. With what we've seen from Sid already, and what we could potentially see this upcoming February, where does he stand in your mind among the greats to have worn the Maple Leaf internationally?
Is certainly on the Mount Rushmore for Canada. He's been fantastic. The golden goal in Vancouver, his leadership at I've been fortunate to be in Vancouver, be in Sochi, and then at the World Cup. He's just someone that people gravitate to watch him prepare. His preparation is second to none. His attention to detail is second to none. His work ethic, his practice habits. He's exceptional. He's one of the best players ever to play our game. And then you take that just to Canada, one of the best Canadians ever. I've been fortunate enough to have a front row seat to the Sidney Crosby show, and I would be one that I would never, if he says he wants to play in 4 more years, I'm not taking that bet against that, knowing his character.
I'm sure everybody else in Canada would be happy to see him play for 4 more years, 8 more years, however long he wants to. Thanks for your time today, Doug. I really appreciate you making some space for us.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and take care.
You too. Take care. The PWHL is on break this week, but we do have some women's hockey action at the Rivalry Series. You can watch that on Wednesday and on Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be back next week to break it all down. Thanks for joining us.